Now let's talk about your series that you're recording for AVIE. You've got 5 volumes so far, and it's called Perspectives, which implies a sort of viewpoint to and from a certain centre. And the certain centre here is the Beethoven Pianist Sonatas. I mean, can you explain a little bit the sort of thinking behind Perspectives?
Yeah, Perspectives was, at the moment, the title came pretty quickly in my head. It was not argued maybe 10 years ago or 15 years ago. Perspectives implied that it would be very, very modern programming. And then other people have said perspectives on are sometimes mixed programs. No, I really meant that Beethoven was unique in our history because he achieved so much in his life and in every genre that he composed in that nobody after him could escape his shadow. There was nobody who would start writing a symphony who didn't look at his achievements. There's nobody who would write a piano sonata who didn't look at his achievements. In fact, even the song cycles. So it seemed natural that when you perform this big opus of piano sonatas, that you look at how could it possibly have influenced other composers after him, or also where could he have taken maybe some inspiration from. Programs have developed in a very unique way. They're not necessarily intellectually stimulated as to say, well, this is exactly in this date or that. Sometimes just a feeling, sometimes just a sound you hear. Thinking about the first Perspectives, it was for me to start this Mozart sonata after the Ades. That was a purpose in the recital, and so that's just a moment that you look for.
So do you find that emerges from a piece of music? You hear a piece of music and you suddenly think,
this would be fantastic.
That would be an amazing juxtaposition.
That would be fantastic, absolutely. And it had for me the same feeling as starting the second movement of Opus 111. That's why these exist together. And there the Ades made so much sense because this kind of juxtaposition of a vivid and jagged movement with a serene and a celestial movement that exists in Opus 111. And the Ades to the Mozart has that effect. But in the Ades you have it actually happening at the same time. hear pieces in a different way if they're programmed in a logical or in a sometimes just from one sense, just from the sense of listening to it. Sometimes I thought of, as in Perspectives 5 now, I was aware of the fact that after just in the time of composing the Année des Pèlerinages, Liszt must have been practicing the Opus 106 because he performed it in Paris just a month later. And that, you know, it must leave something on a composer's mind as far as technique goes, just as you're practicing this tremendously difficult work by Beethoven, of how you can extend the technique again for the piano. For me, I'm not really a cycle pianist. I mean, I could imagine that it can be done. I find this approach more interesting.
You know, there is no sort of template for the piano sonatas. You know, the variety is absolutely staggering, and what he does with the form. I mean, he takes a form that he inherited from Mozart and Haydn, and by the time he's finished with it, 32 sonatas later, he's kind of been everywhere.
Yes, and every single one is different in character, in approach to it. You know, if you start on a 2/7 chord like in 31/3, I mean, who had ever heard of anything like that before? But already in something like the Moonlight Sonata, you know, it's now a very popular piece. But how tremendously unusual must it have sounded in the time?
I mean, should we talk a little bit more about the Hammer Clavier, because it is a sort of fascinating work. You know, I mean, it's big. It has this, you know, huge first movement, this tiny little second movement, this amazing slow movement. Did you want to sort of talk us through it?
I find actually that the scherzo that you just called that little tiny movement, it contains the whole sonata in a much like I was talking about the Adès taking everything together. The scherzo has every detail of everything. It has the lyrical aspect of the first movement and the quirky aspect of the fugue, and it has the length of the harmonic rhythm of the slow movement in the middle of it. So I find it's the central point without us knowing it. The first movement, yes, it's really difficult, and so is the fugue. So the technical challenges are tremendous.
what do you think it tells us about Beethoven as a pianist? Because, you know, obviously he would have played it and it would have fitted in with his technical approach.
We hear different eyewitness stories of how he played the piano. Apparently he sat very still, and as a younger man he seemed to have a lot of fluidity in the wrist and in the elbow, so suggesting somebody who played rather effortlessly. Later on, apparently, it got a little stiffer, and so the motions were a bit more jagged. But I think that the stillness is very interesting, because now we have performers who are wildly gesticulating in a Beethoven sonata. I really don't think that's necessary. I prefer a concentrated approach where you let the music speak for itself.
Now, you've juxtaposed the Hammerklavier, Opus 106, with the first year of Liszt's Année de Pèlerinage, the Swiss year.
Yes.
As you said, Liszt performed the Hammerklavier, or had access to the Hammerklavier as a young boy before it was whisked away, and then performed it. Explain the sort of thinking about the two approaches, because they're both big, ambitious scores for piano.
It fascinated me that he chose to perform the Opus 106 at this point, because it just shows us also the depth of Liszt as a musician. And maybe it was in this Liszt year, where so often he was portrayed as a pop star, sort of his time, that it also interested me in showing this connection.